Good night, everyone doing? God is good and God is good all the time. Merry Christmas! I hope everyone enjoying themselves and be safe while you're out there and dress warm because it's still cold outside. I have a short news on for on tonight. Um and it comes from the Gardener's own news. So more immigrants is busing um to Kamala Harris, the vice president. You know, they busted right in front of her home. On Christmas Eve. So three buses of Central Land, South America, an immigrant arrived to Vice President home from Texas. So three busload of immigrants, were dropped off outside of the Washington D.C. home of United States Vice President, Kamala Harris. Now late on Christmas Eve, and Christmas Eve it was real cold last night. So escalating battle between the President Joe Biden House and a governor, of Southern Republican states over federal immigration policy. So immigrant, believed to be sent from Texas were dropped off in a below freezing temperature because it was freezing last night. With some wearing, so when they got dropped off, some of them was wearing shorts. Some of them were just wearing the short sleeve shirts. They was not dressed for the weather. They just got dropped off in a kind of anywhere, with any kind of clothes on and not properly dressed for the weather. Now Texas governor, now Texas Governor, Greg Abbott, has previously sent buses to Harris observation home and organized with the immigrant. So they said he was the one that sent the immigrants to her house. So the network, Amy Fisher, he told the locals news, ABC, that Abbott, orchestrated the whole thing of dropping off, you know, um, as a political stunt. So they're saying he done all this for political stuff. So not you have to this me speaking when busing the immigrant. You have to care. Where they will be dropping off at. You have to be organized and sort out these shelters and everything. For these immigrants to be busted at certain shelter. It has to be a shelter and not no one home. We don't need a political stunt. Last night was so cold, for this stunt to take place. So we have to take this very serious, when busing the immigrants. They need shelter to get out of the cold. And they said it was not even a dress for the winter. They still had shorts on, short sleeve shirts. I advise all immigrants that you have to be dressed for the weather. We is trying our best to get y'all out of the cold. Trying our best to get y'all out of the cold. For us, anything else, we should not be doing all this out of political stuff. You know, you have to take this serious. And you have to be organized and sort out what shelters that they will be busing to. We cannot drop them anywhere in front of no one home. It has to be in a shelter or a church. So thank God they took the group. That the group they dropped off, knowing they couldn't stay there. Put them back on the bus. Took the group and they traveled to a shelter of a local church. So we thank God for that. Being dropped off in front of the vice president was political stuff. And that should have never had took place. But thank God, they dropped them off at a local church. Where there was warm, and there was warm, and also was giving food and clothes. Because they were not dressed for the weather. So they get them some clothes and probably get them some jackets to put on, you know, and everything else. So when y'all busting these immigrants to different states, you have to know what state and what shelter you're taking them to before you start busing them to state to state. You know, we do not want them to be dropped off in front of someone's home. They have to be properly dropped off at a church or either a shelter. You know, because we trying to get them out of the cold quickly as possible. You know, so Tetanana, you know, with Sam, the first respond. There was the first respond and aid group that were also there to meet the buses. You know, so they got to respond that they had immigrants, you know, busing from state to state. You know, so they got first hand on to meet the bus. You know, when they got dropped off, saying the drop off had been made in Washington since April. You know, so they already knew since April there was gonna be busing. So busing in Washington D.C. was a political stunt. You know, so Tatiana, you know, she told CNN, that they are always, you know, there's always here welcoming folks with open arms. You know, so thank God for that. You know, to have so many nice people are welcome to immigrants. You know, so they are very welcome. And they've been knowing since April they was coming there. That's why they already was out there to meet the bus. You know, so the other situation was a political stuff when they already know they was gonna be dropping them off at this local church. You know, so the arrivals was an effort by every, to force the President Bennett to step up, immigration control at the United States border with Mexico. So there was a stunt, you know, trying to force Mr. President Bennett to step up to the plate with the immigrants. Trying to blame the president that so many deaths occurred and they're out in the court. That's not the president's fault, and you can't force the issue in that way. You know, only way you can solve anything, you got to have a meeting, either have a 101 to solve any problem, anything. Not do it by force. So me, this is not the way to do this by force. Through communication and coming with some kind of common grounds. You have to come to some kind of agreement. To solve any issue, not forcing it and doing political stuff. That won't solve anything but start battle. Not to solve. So we see the Abbott. Wrote Mr. President. A letter. Saying the border is secure. To address the problem. Now, this is not the way to address the problem. Have a meeting to discuss these issues. So he mad because Mr. President made a statement that everything is secure. So Mr. Abbott is concerned, and upset that everything is not secure. But you have them words going back in the fall. It's not doing in public. It's to come to agreement in a meeting or a private meeting or one to one. So policy enforcement help law at the border due to Corona 19, COVID 19. Is COVID 19 is still active. They never told us. They never told us that the COVID had shut down, that it was over with. So it's still active. So meaning anyone from a country have to come to the United States. You have to get checked out. That's the reason why the policy came in effect. So they want to just throw away the policy and have everyone just coming through to the United States, when the COVID is still going on. And you still got other stuff is floating along also. So that have to be checked out before entering to the United States. So this can be a dangerous, to bypass through the United States, without being checked out. So I agree with DHS, no one should put their lives in the hands of smothering no risk, life and limb, attempting to cross only to be returned. So not only putting their life in danger, but you also be putting somebody else's life once they come through the border without being checked out through the policy or health check. And this come through the border to the United States. You putting yourself in risk and somebody else's life in risk. because then they're gonna have to figure out where it come from, you know. So DHS, Department of Health Security, Homeland Security, stated warning that anyone attempted to enter with our organization, is something to expose under the policy known as Title 42. So the Title 42 is um, for all to come through and get checked out for COVID before you enter. Not just COVID, but anything before you enter the United States, because you're coming from a whole nother country. You're not coming from another state. And so these things have to be checked out. You know, um, and so they also saying, that they also saying throw away the Title 42 because of the long line that's outside. You know, because of the long line outside. Even though if you don't get checked out, it's so many immigrants out there in line. You can always have a line. Because they're constantly floating and getting it in line. So what I was thinking about, you know, we can wherever they're standing at, we could build like a tunnel from here to hold at least 2,000 people. That way they'll be standing in line inside of a little tunnel way with heat and air. Hold up 2,000 people. That way they won't be out in the cold. They'll be standing in line inside a little tunnel thing that we need to build for them. I'm trying to come up with something the best way I can. And other than that, everybody else have to stay back in Mexico until the line gets out. That's the best I could come up with, to have so many people out, from out in the cold. So from the border point to the end of the tunnel that will hold 200 people, where they have heat and air. So they won't be outside of the cold. They'll still be inside of this tunnel. They're gonna be coming to, where they gonna have heat for them. Let it hold by 2,000 people. And everyone else had to get turned back, and that's the best we could come up with. So many won't be in, outside in the cold. Let it hold by 2,000 people. And to still be standing in line, or at least they'll be warm under a shelter and be warm while they're standing in line. So that's the best I can come up with for now. So one, the government have to organize and find a shelter for them before busing them anywhere. And that's why I'm coming up with. And why they in that shelter, in that little ton of shelter, 2,000 people is waiting. That way you could have home DHS. You could be checking them for COVID while they're standing in line. They're gonna be under the shelter. So that way 200 people can just start floating on through. Then you hold 2,000 people. That's the best I could come up with. We can hold 2,000 people, work with them and still get checked, then float them out and hold another 2,000 people. That way 2,000 people won't be out in the cold. So two, this is a serious matter. Not a political stuff. We have to take this serious. It's like they're treating the immigrant like nothing. Just dropping them anywhere with shorts and t-shirts on and all this kind of stuff. You cannot drop them off in front of no one home to try to have Mr. President force him to step up to the plate. That's not how you do things. You have to take this in consideration and be mindful. And you have to realize you shooting a battle. With the immigrants right in the middle. So you have to realize, you have to have a private meeting, communication, behind closed doors, to have some kind of agreement instead of doing political stuff to trying to get Mr. President attention. So three, for the problem to be solved, you have to have a meeting. You can't force the issue with someone. You have to have a meeting. You got to have communication. Instead of forcing the issue. Because when you're constantly forcing the issue without trying to communicate, it will start battle. So four, there are ways to come to common grounds, to come to some kind of agreement. You know, you have to come to some kind of common grounds, because you can't keep doing political stunts, just dropping them off in front of someone's home. You know, when you busing these immigrants, to have to sort out shelters before to get on bus. There have to be sought out for shelters or either churches. You have to do this research before they get on the bus, before you start busing them from state to state. All this has to be looked over first. You know, we do not want to be dropping them off in front of no one home to do political stuff, to be first time news. So we need to take this serious and take this in consideration, and we need to come up with ideas to get so many off the coast. And that's why I say we're gonna have to build some kind of tunnel with heat and air. That way we'll have 2,000 people in waiting, standing. They will still be standing in line, but they'll be standing in a shelter, being warm. Not for them to sleep and lay down. They will still be standing in line to try to get to the border. Our my job is to try to get so many as possible out of the cold. And we have to take them serious and drop them off in a proper manner. You know, and thank God. The church, well, really, they said that was booked since April. So the church already knew they was coming by them, but this was particular stuff just to stop first. So to do that little stunt when they already supposed to be heading to the church, this was booked since April, they said. So that's all the short news I have for you all tonight. Y'all have a blessed day, and I'll see y'all on the next video. And Merry Christmas!